All right, last week we figured everything out. We've got a clear vision, the strategy is sound, users are defined, personas, their needs were uncovered, and we even set objectives. So now what? Well, let's take a step back because we got to figure out how we're going to do the work. So software development methodologies are how we're going to do that. I do not like talking about this. Honestly, I am so tired of talking about all the methodologies, all the hybrids, and all the strong opinions around it, but we got to do it. They're the basics, and we're going to talk it through, but just know nothing's perfect like it is in the books. Everyone has strong opinions about how work should be done in that way, which methodology they should use when, and I'm really concerned about, getting done. So we're going to cover the basics, but we're going to do it as best as we can with this. So the classic battle between Agile and Waterfall, I'm tired of hearing about this, but Waterfall is more of the old school way, the NASA, the Boeing, everything else where you're, coming up with a huge list of requirements. You have a ton of business analysts that try to figure out everything that the user needs ahead of time. That is, like I said, kind of more linear and sequential, and that you're going to have these gates as you go along the way that you have to pass through to get those pieces of development into production and then eventually to users, if ever. I don't know. I've been to a few Waterfall projects. It took a good long time, and Agile doesn't quite do that. We do it in a more iterative development cycle. You're focusing on collaboration and flexibility and coming up with a different framework for how we talk about requirements. Instead of requirements, we have user stories, and we'll talk about that more. So there are organizations that define all of these things. There are the Scrum Alliance, the Agile Alliance, and even Project Management Institute, which is more famous for project management in the PMP. They even do a ton of Agile certifications as well. So you're going to hear Certified Scrum Product Owner, a CSPO, going to hear Certified Scrum Master. I'm the first one. But yeah, you'll sign up for it when your company pays for it, I guess. Wouldn't you rather watch this video then? Scrum is an Agile framework for managing projects through sprints. So you're going to hear the term sprint, and that doesn't mean the wireless company that was just acquired by T-Mobile. I guess running, I probably should have thought of that one first, but it means chunks of work broken apart into, 1, 2, 3, or 4 weeks. Usually I see 2 weeks there, sometimes 1 as well. Kanban is another way to organize how things get done. It's just a simple board where you can make work visible, and the idea is to limit the work in process. A lot of the way to speed things up is to limit what you're working on at one time. So do one thing at a time. Don't have 50 things on your plate, you'll never finish them. And it's also a pull method. So this is a little bit different than we talked about before with sprints, where you're assigned work in each of these chunks of sprints, but this one you can pull instead of push work out to the team. So as you have capacity, you're going to be pulling in more and more things. So what does that actually look like? Here is a Trello board. It's basically pretty simple. You have a backlog of things to do. You have stuff that's being designed, things on the to-do list, where you're doing right now, what's in review, so you can get approval. Then you're testing it, and then you are done. And you have a definition of what is actually done. So you can link through the description below and check out that template. It's pretty good. The lean startup is one thing we'll talk about as well. So lean startup coming out of lean manufacturing in the Toyota production way. So Tachi Ono, really super cool guy. Eric Ries is another super cool guy that applied this to startups and has amazing workshops and a lot of impetus behind all of this movement towards this fast iterative way to develop came out of that. And there are a lot of fans like me out there for that. But why I bring that up is the most important part of that is the minimum viable product. So you're focused on launching to a customer something that is the minimum that you can launch that will get to the feedback you need from that customer. So instead of having a million requirements and then launching the perfect product with everything solid in the app and ready to go and everything a user would ever want to do, ready to rock, you're trying to get the task that jobs to be done we talked about before, done for that user. So maybe the page wasn't completely perfect or incredibly fast, but getting it out there. So one of the reasons we do that is between the feedback from the customer that they actually give us and how they use that product or even don't use that product, that allows us to test our hypotheses about that product and see if that feature or product is valuable to a user. So that simplest version we can launch to them will let us learn that, and then we're co-creating the product together. So a lot of variations have come up on that because even the term minimum viable product, people think it's just sloppy or not good enough. So there's this oft misunderstood concept around minimum viable product. So people come up with another set of acronyms. So minimum whatever the product. I don't really care. The minimum viable product is a brilliant concept, and it really helps us ground on what do we need to do to figure that out before we invest a ton of time, effort, money, blood, sweat, and tears. And one of the examples they often give is Groupon. When they launched, they had a landing page and it was a coupon. It's like, 5 minutes on like cutting and pasting an image. Did you really have to hire, a $400,000 a year developer and hire a whole huge sales team and like do all these things? Like, what is the minimum you can do to figure out if people actually want to use your product? So that may be something that doesn't scale. So maybe you don't have time to sit there and copy 30,000 coupons into there. Probably not, but you do have time to do that for a few weeks to see if it works before you invest in doing that for a bigger project. Why do I mention MVP now? Because I want to figure out what are my now problems, not what are my next problems or later problems. And this is looking at a roadmap that's pretty simple, where it's just divided into now, next, later. But we are focused on the now right now. Then we can get to road mapping, which is more of the long-term view of all these things after we walk through all the elements of that. So how do we actually go from this strategy to this plan to actually working on the work, like day to day, to task? So in Agile, there are these structures of theme, epic, user story, and task. And these words are a little bit frustrating because they're used differently in different companies. But well, that's kind of par for the course because it's product management, which is used entirely differently at different companies and means different things. So there you go. A theme, which is a strategic initiative. Initiative is a term you'll hear quite a bit. You have epic. Sometimes you'll hear features here, but epic is a large body of work that describes that kind of major functionality under one of those overarching strategic initiatives. And then you have the heart of the matter. You have the user story, and then you have individual tasks for design and development and all of that. So we're going to talk a lot more about this, but here's some great examples. So Snapchat, you've got a theme for enhanced user expressions. So you got an epic for implementing a mood status. And then you can get into what the actual user stories are and then the tasks that would help you accomplish that. So those epics will be across multiple releases, and we'll talk about releases and things like that. And then the user stories are within that sprint that we want to complete. And then, if they don't, we can maybe roll it to the next sprint, and we'll talk about that in the next video. But we are then going to show some other examples as well. So what do these words even mean? They're all different by the company, but it's important to structure it this way so we know what to do when, and if we can say that we have successfully achieved those different initiatives by breaking it down into these lower levels. And here's an example. So for Yik Yak, which is an app you may have heard of on college campuses, there's a theme that you could make for enhancing campus engagement. So you could do a campus event polling feature and a user story. So to get used to how user stories sound as a Yik Yak user, so you have the user, I want to participate in campus event polls so that you can be aware of happenings in your college community. So you've got a user type, you've got what you want to accomplish, and you have a benefit. We then are able to determine how to solve for that with these different tasks and break that apart into engineering tasks, into design tasks, and all of those different things. So there'll probably be a lot more than that, but this is just a little sampling of that. So another one for Be Real. There's a whole bunch of themes we could have here, but how to increase authentic social interaction across this app. You've got enhancing privacy controls, so you could customize who can see the daily captures, so you can control privacy. You can temporarily disable daily captures, so you can take a break. I don't know, maybe the whole point of it isn't so you could do that, but that's something they probably debated. And you could improve capture quality. So that's another epic. So you've got a different epic, a different set of user stories that you could cover on that as well. So a lot of different ways you could organize work that is linked to the value to the user. So going back to the user needs we talked about, the user stories help us link to that benefit and the task they're trying to accomplish. So that way we don't develop something that doesn't fit their needs. There's always that tendency to be down in the weeds, working on development things, and we're accomplishing things by coding and by making software that works, but doesn't work to help the user do the task that they want to do. There are other types of development tasks that are on technical debt and setting the stage for other things to come, but ultimately they do connect to user needs, and the clearer we can make that, the more will be able to make impact sooner. User stories. The template we have for that is who, what, and why. So who are we building it for? That's as X user. So as a TikTok creator, what is, what are we building? What's the intention? I want to create a video with filters that I can select from. Why? So that I have variety or whatever it is. So you have that 3-element part of the user story. So there are a ton of user stories you could create, and we'll get to prioritization later because it's infinite of the things you could want to do and what your users will ask for and other people will put into a backlog request. Some companies even have public backlog requests. So why do we write user stories like that? It's a simplified way to ensure that everyone, from product managers to developers to stakeholders, understand who, what, why of the product. So we want to streamline decision-making and make sure that we're allocating our resources, our hours that we have to work on that to the right places that are going to have the most impact. And we want to prevent developing something that doesn't fit their needs. So after we have the user stories and the tasks, we have acceptance criteria. So how do we know that we're good with the user story, that it's done? Acceptance criteria are conditions a product must meet to be complete by stakeholders. So do they say it's complete? It's not done until we say it's done, and that's why we have very explicit ACs, or acceptance criteria. An example for the TikTok content creator, the user story that they would want to easily access a variety of filters so they can enhance visual quality of the videos. So acceptance criteria could sound something like content creator can easily find and access the filter options from the video creation screen. At least 10 different filters are available. Content creator can see a real-time preview of what the video looks like with the filter. Content creator can easily apply and remove filters with no more than 2 clicks. A content creator can save the filter choices and then continue editing. You could do a performance one. So you could say applying a filter takes less than 2 seconds to render on a standard mobile device. So if you have a HTC Android 1 phone, probably not. But if you have like an iPhone 7 and up, so things like that, you actually want to be specific on and figure out what the requirement would be. So what does that actually look like? So in JIRA, I want to show you a preview of what that is so that it goes from the conceptual to the real. So this is what you would see. This is where it would link to have a description like we talked about that would have the user stories paste in there and the tasks there as well. And they're all linked together. And if this is all set up right, it goes, task, user story, epic, and theme up there. So obviously the different names vary on the different ways it's set up, but this is where it is. It would link out to Figma. They've got a plugin where it's set up there. You would add comments and you change status as it goes from being developed and refined, and then in process and review, and then in QA to have testers QA it and done. That was the structure of how work gets done, particularly in an Agile project. Next up is what an Agile team looks like, the workflow for that team, the meetings even, and also the Agile rituals.